Are you a teacher that needs help with the concept of racism? Would you like to know more about racial identity development? Would you like to know how to actively take part in cross-racial dialogue? Then this movie is for you. So you may begin by asking, what is racism? Racism is a form of prejudice. Prejudice is a preconceived judgment or opinion, usually based on limited information. Notions of power or privilege do not have to be addressed when our understanding of racism is constructed. After understanding racism and prejudice, we have to figure out how it affects our ability to work with students in a variety of settings. As educators, we need to remove all biases of race before we are able to work with students of color. In diverse settings, teachers may receive a large variety of race in the classroom. It is important to accept all students as well as help each student accept each other and where they came from. We begin our understanding by looking at racial identity development. Black children and adolescents see themselves in terms of race because that is how the world views them. Tatum says the black children absorbs many of the beliefs and values of the dominant white culture, including the idea that it is better to be white. Many members of the black community think about what it means to be a group that is targeted by racism. There have been several acts throughout history that portrays a negative name to their culture. This affects how blacks think of themselves. We find many African American children grouped together in the cafeteria, for example, because they find that group to quote-unquote know how to be black. They have absorbed the stereotypical images of black youth and the popular culture, and they're reflecting those images in their self-presentation. Success in school is not necessarily a stereotype for African American children. We see a lot of negativity towards making the black community succeed in school. They are often seen as failures in the classroom. Some teachers even still have the stereotype that they won't succeed. We need to remove the stereotype in our own classrooms in order to make African American children as successful as possible. Next, we move on to how we understand white racial identity development. Many people from the white community never fully questioned their membership of their ethnic group. Whiteness was simply the unexamined norm, said Tatum. White people feel good and superior in society at times, based on the racism they have grown up with and experienced around them. But there are steps to try and change this thinking. They often perceive themselves as colorblind, completely free of prejudice, unaware of their own assumptions about other racial groups. Some whites have grown up in families where they are taught that they are superior, and they pass this idea on to generations after them. In order for whites to lose this thinking, they must have encounters with other races, so they can see how racism happens and operates. Once the silence is broken, the cycle of racism becomes increasingly visible. Next, we move on to our understanding of Latino, American Indian, and Asian Pacific Islander development. Beverly Daniel Tatum says, although conversations about race, racism, and racial identity tend to focus on black-white relations, to do so ignores the experiences of their targeted racial or ethnic groups. When we look at the experiences of Latinos, American Indians, and Asian Pacific Americans in the United States, we can easily see that racial and cultural oppression has been a part of their past and present, and that it plays a role in the identity development process for individuals in these groups as well. Latinos, also known as Hispanics, were the second largest and fastest growing community of color in the United States. It was the general feeling among white settlers that whites and Mexicans were never meant to live together. Everything was segregated, such as schools, housing, and employment. Many Latinos did not become incorporated with the United States because they wanted to. They were forced to because of wars and poverty in their own countries. Latinos have a high importance for their family and extended family. They turned to their family for support and comfort. Achieving in school and at work were considered important for Latino teens because success would allow them to take care of family members. White American teens considered education and work as a means of gaining independence from their families. Latinos are also very connected to their native language. It is the carrier of cultural values and attitudes, says Tatum. Next are American Indians. There are almost 2 million American Indians and Alaska Natives living in the United States. Most of these groups have government relations, while others are not even recognized by the government. Indians make up many cultural communities. Each group has their own language, religion, customs, economy, and environment. As with Latinos, American Indians find extended family to be very important. Group needs are more important than individual needs. Indians were forced to live on reservations after the Americans took over the land. In the 1940s and 50s, Indians were forcibly taken from their homes and forced to live in urban areas. This was devastating for them. Alcoholism, suicide, and homicide increased to epidemic proportions and continued to be the leading cause of death among American Indians. Asian Pacific Americans come from East Asia, Southeast Asia, the Pacific Islands, South Asia, West Asia, and the Middle East. Religious beliefs vary greatly among these groups and include Buddhism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, Shintoism, ancestor worship, and animism. Chinese were the first to come to the United States during the gold rush in California. Asian Americans have experienced great success in the United States. Asians have many stereotypes, such as they are quiet and content with the status quo, and they are very smart. Now we move on to understanding development in multiracial families and communities. It is more complicated for biracial children to discover their identity because they come from parents of two different races. While it is clear that biracial children can grow up happy and healthy, it is also clear that particular challenges associated with a biracial identity must be negotiated. Many biracial children are asked, "What are you?" This question shows that today's society sees everyone as one certain race. Biracial families are becoming more and more popular. During the preschool years, children are also taught by their parents to label themselves racially. Some parents may intentionally choose black, recognizing that if the child looks black, he or she will be treated as much, says Tatum. On the other hand, some parents want their children to see themselves as biracial and having two identities that they are proud and part of. Certain communities see biracial families differently. Communities with positive intergroup relations provide environmental support for a biracial identity, and communities with high levels of racial tension are more likely to undermine it. The pressure to choose sides in such situation is too great for developing children. Now we ask ourselves, what will I do to embrace and actively take part in a cross-racial dialogue? Students of different backgrounds may have different beliefs and interests. In the classroom, we should try our best to honor each child's background by doing activities that relate to their culture. Also, by doing this, we open the eyes of all the children so they can see there is more in the world besides themselves. With multicultural families, we can honor both sides of the children's family. Many young children may not understand why someone has parents who look different. We can have a dialogue in the classroom about this as well. Confusion about race begins in the early years. When embracing in these conversations, we need to try and keep it simple enough for their terms, but also get the point across. For example, when Beverly Daniel Tatum was asked by her son about his race, she replied with, "Your skin is brown because you have something in your skin called melanin. Melanin is very important. It helps protect your skin from the sun. Everybody has melanin, you know, but some people have more than others. Preschool children are very focused on outward appearances, and skin color is a racial feature that they are most likely to comment on. It is important to address a question rather than quieting your children or giving a false answer. If this happens, their questions don't go away. They just go unasked. In the classroom, it is important to create a safe environment from the beginning, so the students don't feel like they can't talk about race with the instructor and other students. Our goal is to make them start talking about it. Talking about it in the classroom causes the students to think about it and bring it up with their friends or even their family at home. It is important to keep the concept of mixed race positive. Children and teenagers receive many negative ideas about certain races that aren't true. Resisting the stereotypes and affirming their definitions of themselves is part of the task facing young black women in both white and black communities. We can begin reading cross-racial books to children at a very young age. Even though they may not completely understand, they still think about what is being portrayed. While observing in my second grade classroom, they are able to read many books that show a variety of races. Their teacher finds it very important because the school is not very diverse. There are many books that you could research and choose from. We need to continually break the silence about racism. Whenever we can, we need to talk about it at home, at school, in our houses of worship, in our workplace, in our community groups, says Taylor. Now that we have answered most of your questions, go out and engage in a dialogue with your students.